problem that we're seeing here in and around our communities and neighborhoods is on private land. That's where that's where we see a lot of the fires. That's where a lot of the cost for the fires is incurred. The Village of Ruidoso here has a few ordinances in place which does require landowners, they take action to manage the forest on their property. In the county, we don't have such an ordinance. A lot of that responsibility is on the landowners. At least in the county, if you see a problem on someone else's land, the best thing you can do is let them know and point them in the right direction. There's very little that can be done if the landowner themselves isn't going to take the initiative.
Mike, I agree with what you're saying, but I think it goes beyond. It's shame on us if we don't control our own trees on our own property. I don't care how large the property is. But you can look up any side of any mountain, we see all kinds of brown trees up those mountains, and I think that's going to do nothing but worse and worse and worse. I've hunted up in Upper Colorado, and there's not hardly anything left up in Upper Colorado. And let's get beyond the private property. I've got another question on private property in a minute, but this is up in the forest where the problem is.
I think part of it is kind of put it into perspective. I'm originally from northern New Mexico, and if you remember back about 10, 15 years ago, there was a big pine beetle epidemic up there, especially the Ojo Caliente up through Taos area. You go through there now, and there's you see a lot still a lot of standing trees. It's easy to see a lot of brown when it's there, but once it goes, you'll be amazed how much is actually still there. Also, kind of in perspective, especially if we look at our mixed conifer forests and our pinon forests, those are 200 to 300-year-old forests. And it's hard to watch it die and crumble down, but again, this is succession. Another 50 years from now, another 100 years from now, those forests will be rebounding and coming back. Another 200 years from now, they'll be right back where they were today.
I think it's a really good question that both of you asked there. And I think the answer, it's a little broader than just, this has happened on private land, this has happened on national forest system land, or Mescalero tribal land. It's happening on this landscape, regardless of who is managing that land or who owns that land. I think that the presentation that Frank put on today and the one that Sharon put on last month speaks to that. So, you ask, what are we all doing about that? Well, it's a question of scale to one degree. There are tens of thousands of acres out there. And a lot of those acres are affected by this epidemic, and in terms of what to do about it, the only thing we can do is triage that. We just do not have resources or the capacity really to treat. I mean, there's 460,000 acres on just the Smoky Bear Ranger District, and so we've tried to do that. We've tried to do that over the years. We've concentrated a lot of our efforts on the places around the wildland urban interface, but we've also tried to do some restoration work outside of that because it is a system. You can't just treat one area and forget about the rest. No, to try to achieve a more healthy forest, we are changing the way that we're looking at that as well. A lot of the work that we've done, particularly around Ruidoso, we had prescriptions there that were designed to try to get some fuels out of the woods and try to protect this community against catastrophic wildfire. after and trying to achieve the healthy forest first, because that will result in a forest less susceptible to that. Part of that is what Frank was talking about spacing. You know, we're going to more spaced clumps of trees. So you may have 6, 10 trees there that do have interlocking crowns. However, there's grassland around those before you hit the next patch of trees. So that fuel loading up in the air is interrupted. So that fire will go to the ground when it comes through there. Now, that's something that we're going back and addressing in the areas around Ruidoso. You've probably heard us talking about Perk Grindstone planning area and working area. We worked a lot in there. We spent a lot of money in there. Well, we're going back up to Grindstone Mesa this year and trying to implement those new ideas about cutting. Now, those clumps of trees and that landscape, same thing Frank says, you know, we're looking for mixed age stands, little young trees, medium age trees, some older trees in there, and wide spaces. So that means that when we go in there and cut these areas, we don't want to incorporate a diameter cap. There's not going to be any artificial cap that says can't cut anything over, 14 inches, 16 inches, whatever. We're going to use the best available science provided to us by people that frankly know what they're doing to achieve that ultimate goal of having a healthy, resilient, fire-adapted forest. And I wish that I could do that. I wish that I could accomplish that over my career, but it took several people's careers to get us to the point we're at now, and it's going to take several more people's careers to get us out of it. And all I can say is that we're trying, and I think that we're trying as a group here as well, because as I started off this ramble, we're all in this situation, and it's going to take all of us to help get us out of this situation. When we're identifying new areas to work, we're really trying to dovetail those areas with areas that other jurisdictions are working on, because if I go and treat a postage stamp out there and everything else around it isn't treated, then I've done nothing, And so we've worked real hard, this group that Dick has put a lot of energy into over the last decade. We've worked very hard to try to maximize the work that we do out there. And I think that it's having an effect. And I just hope we can continue this momentum. I really appreciate seeing so many people here taking an interest in this sort of thing, and it really does help to keep my energy up and focus on it too. So I think that was a good question.
What do you say about species diversification? Say like in the pinon juniper area where you have pinon, alligator juniper, and one-seeded juniper. Well, my place, I've tried to keep a little bit of all of them. What are your thoughts?
We generally do that. We will have, our silviculturalists will put together specifications or a prescription for the thinning. And there are times when we'll have a preferred species over another. So when you're going and creating that opening up the canopy to what you want, if you're choosing between a pinon and an alligator juniper or a one-seed juniper, you might have a preference. But generally speaking, our treatments around here, we're not just wiping out one species altogether, because some of these areas, even just around Ruidoso, it's Ponderosa pine stand, but you see some really, 400-year-old alligator junipers growing there. So, you're not gonna just say, well, that's just, I know some people say, well, juniper is just weeds, but you're not gonna call that a weed. It's a 400-year-old, great big greenback. So we're not gonna cut that just because there's a 12-inch diameter ponderosa pine next to it that's got mistletoe in it, because that tree's unhealthy already, it's gonna die, so we would choose a juniper. Whereas a lot of times, you can't always, so we don't always judge purely on species, but we do some species preference, but also with, size, what size it is, and health considerations also. So kind of end up with uneven age and diverse species. That way, when you get a disease or insects come through, if it's all the same size, or especially all the same species of tree, it takes one strain of disease, one insect to wipe out the whole stand, whereas if you have that diversity, it's going to give you a resiliency. So for the most part, we kind of, we generally we don't wipe out one whole species and just leave one species of monoculture in the forest.
And a lot of that is site-specific, and that is, you can't treat every single piece of property identical, so, it depends on what's there to begin with, but it depends on the site that it is. You're not gonna treat a hillside the same as you do a valley bottom, for example. It's gonna have different treatments.
What about sensible logging practices? I think the BIA does that quite successfully and makes money to help the forest. Are we doing anything like that?
The Lincoln National Forest does logging. In certain areas, there's a lot of factors involved with logging. It's got to have good access among a lot of other variables. We've got a timber sale that we're going to be putting out this year on the Grindstone Mesa, and we have a few other things here and there. On this particular district, we don't have as many opportunities for commercial logging as some other forests, or the Sacramento Ranger District on our forest has a lot more opportunities due to what trees they have and the landscape and access and stuff like that to make it economically viable, and then also to be able to do it without causing some of the problems with soil if it's too steep or this or that.
Yeah, that's understandable, but like the trees that have died from the beetle kill, are those trees useful for logging, or they're a damaged tree and of no use?
One of the problems that we have, particularly on this district, in this area, is the industry is not there. And we don't have a viable lumber industry, and they have tried, and that's kind of been one of our goals, but it's really a hindrance to doing any extensive logging. And to answer your question, it can be used, but the insects bring with it a stain, a blue stain, which can be beneficial in some cases, but it can also stain the wood so it's not as economically feasible to sell.
Well, with the framing construction, that's pretty much what the timber is for, isn't it?
Some of the economic quotes I've heard over the last year is the timber market is so depressed right now that for what you can sell the milled, ready-to-go lumber won't pay for the gas to get the wood out off the mountain.
Yeah.
At this point, it's just not economically viable at this point. Hopefully, another 2-3 years, the housing market will turn around, we'll start seeing building again, at which point maybe that'll turn around.
Yeah, there's another consideration too, when you talk about fire or bug kill, and the natural processes, as soon as something dies, it starts to decompose, and so you get other insects and other processes that are working in there to deteriorate the wood, and so in any of those kind of situations, there's a finite window where you can actually use that product or can't use that product.
Yes.
I have about 6 acres, which I was very lucky that it was saved from the Little Bear Fire, but now the beetles are taking it. I've managed to get rid of about 150 dead trees this summer, but I've about run out of time. And I have a specific question in terms of my other about 300 to go through and cut, you know, drop those dead trees to the ground as fast as I can, and then burn that slash as I can, or should I do a tree? Because that's what I've been doing this summer, is I cut 3 trees and move it to a big area where I can safely burn it. I burn them off, and then I go work on another 3 trees. It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does matter.
What's the recommendation?
When you're cutting trees, especially between April, March, when the beetles are moving, you wanna get them out, you wanna move them, mulch them, chip them.
Well, I'm talking about the trees that are already dead. I mean, they're standing
You still
dead.
have, you still have, what's the,
Marvin.
the other beetles that eat the dead wood.
Boars.
The boars, the wood boars, you're still gonna have wood boars in there. I don't know what the recommendation is for leaving the standing dead in there, other than when they get weak enough, then we have wind,
Well, yeah,
then it's a
yeah.
danger to whoever's walking through the woods.
I mean, that's why, you know, I'll work on it as fast as I can. Like I said, I'm out of time this year, but in terms of next summer.
Sharon's here.
Yeah, Sharon is here. She's our bug person.
I did all the talking last time, so I was just gonna listen this time, but I'm not gonna make it. So I'll address that. The standing dead, sometimes those beetles will reinfest. So you may have some, again, if the tree, it depends on how long the tree's been dead. Most of the time, those beetles have left that dead tree and they're in the green trees
Yeah.
now. So the recommendation is with 300 of them, that's a lot. You have a lot to take care of. And so it's, I don't know the size of them, but if you're doing, some of the recommendation is you're not gonna be able to cover all of it with plastic or move all of it off.
Oh, yeah, that's out of the question.
Yeah, so if you can get the trees down, what I would do if I were you is if you have trees that you see that are currently infested, I would deal with those first.
Okay.
The dead trees are the dead trees, and you might wanna leave some of them now just for habitat. If it's ponderosa pine, they'll stand for 7 to 10 years
All right.
before they fall over. So you've got some time, and it's good wildlife habitat. And so I would concentrate on where you think the beetles are now, and take care of those trees, and cut them down and cover them with plastic, or move it off, or chip it, whatever, you know, you can do with it to get rid of it, and then deal with the dead trees as you can.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up on that one. When I cut down a tree that's died, say this year, I always take maybe a square foot, peel back the bark, and typically I see a dozen of the beetles, black beetles, but maybe 2 dozen of the larvae in there. So I'm concerned about the larvae. They'll make it through the winter and presumably become more beetles and infest other trees further down.
And it depends, sometimes if the tree's dead, and you're seeing these larvae, sometimes those are the wood borer larvae.
Okay.
And they get bigger and they're flatter and they're uglier. And those are not going to affect your live trees. They will bore into the dead wood, then they make it not viable for lumber, because they go in quite a ways, and they make a big hole into the woods, and then you can't use that outer wood for boards or anything. But they're not gonna affect your live trees, they only eat the dead trees. And so that's also the noise people hear. They thought that was the bark beetles, that's the wood borers. Yeah.
Whenever you do, especially on the forest, whenever you do treatments and then you go in and burn, why do you do prescribed burns, and are you planning to do any this winter?
We do have prescribed burns planned through the winter. And the reason we go prescribed burn, follow up with a thinning project is several reasons. For one thing, if we do a thinning project on the forest, we're covering a lot of acres. And the most economical thing to do with the slash left over from thinning out the trees is to burn it. We can't possibly remove it all and haul it off somewhere and deal with it somewhere else. So it's economics for one thing. And then another thing, putting fire on the ground to burn up the slash gets the nutrients back into the soil. And a lot of times sometimes our burns target just a targeted slash. the trees that we cut down and plowed, and we may burn it in the snow, but a lot of times we'll actually burn it when there's not snow. So we'll actually burn up some of the needle casts, the grass, the duff layer is that organic material that's around here is pretty thick before you even get down to real dirt. And it's good to burn up a lot of that, and that gets those nutrients back into the soil, healthier soil, and stimulates forbs and grasses in the future. So it's overall pretty healthy for the ecosystem to put fire back onto the ground.
And when are you planning to come?
Actually, next week, we're gonna plan on doing some broadcast burning in Cedar Creek. Burning up some of the needle cast and also some of that tall grass that grew during monsoons. Burn that, reduce the fire hazard along the roads, so we won't have any accidental fire starts, right in, amongst the, on the forest, but right next to the residents there.
Don't you also have to be careful about sterilizing the ground? I mean, there's a certain amount that happened during the forest fire.
Yeah, if you get real substantial heat that lasts for a long time in an area, it can cook the soil, so you kill all the organics in the soil, and then you would have a hard time, you would have a hard time getting grasses and forbs to be able to grow. Most of the time when we're doing our prescribed burning, we're doing it under less extreme conditions. We're not doing it in June when the temperature is so hot, at its height, and then the humidity is so low. So most of the time when we're doing prescribed burners, we're not getting the intensity that does that. There's some isolated spots. If we have really large piles of slash, the heat can get intense enough to do some soil damage in that site-specific area. But overall, you're burning slash that, with a 200-acre treatment, and you're basically burning slash is basically 20 piles. So we're kind of isolating the negative impact to the soil area in that fashion. But for the most part, our smaller piles and our broadcast burns are low enough in intensity and not long enough residence time to affect the soil.
My question is, we got the gentleman down there, that name of the BIA, and also Dave Warnack from the US Forest Service. So I was wondering that, since these two different agencies are here, are there any differences between the two agencies and how your standards as far as managing the forest is? And if there is, what are those, and is there anything that you feel that you can take from the other agency?
Well, we took their forester. That tells you anything. The Lincoln is very lucky to have hired Sharon Paul, who spent a long time working for the BIA. And I feel that really helps both of our agencies to look for some of the commonalities in how we manage. And I think, Joe, that, forester is a forester, They see the world in trees, and they see healthy forest very much the same, regardless of which agency or jurisdiction that they work for. I know that Mr. Cook here was a forester as well. And so I think that the similarities far outweigh any sort of differences. But I think the differences probably highlighted more in terms of planning for and implementing any of the projects. But the ultimate goals for those projects, I think, are very similar. I don't know if they were.
I agree. Probably one of the biggest differences, between the forest and the reservation. On the BIA side, we mostly answer just to the tribe, which is a much smaller population base, much more more hands-on control of what's going on. Where the Forest Service, you're not only kind of beholden to the local communities, but the nation. nation as a whole has input to what policies and what goes on that land. And so that's probably one of the biggest differences between our management. But ultimately, our goals are the same. You know, we want healthy, productive forests. You know, maybe some of the other, you know, in my experience, I've worked for both the Park Service and the Forest Service throughout my career. And definitely, in the Park Service, being a recreation bent, you know, that's, you're managing for people's recreation, hiking, you know, trails, and experiencing the forest differently. Then certainly the BIA is looking a lot more of the logging, a lot more of kind of the big products part of managing the forest. You know, again, kind of like at the beginning of the presentation is, what are your ultimate goals? What are your ultimate, you know, wants from that are gonna, you know, govern what and how you do it. But, you know, I agree, a forester is a forester. We're looking at, you know, a productive, healthy forest that sustainably produces what we want to get out of it.
I can just add on with that, a lot of folks don't realize is that the environmental regulations between the Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, Forest Service, BIA, it's all exactly the same. Okay, I work on the reservation, worked there 20 years. It's all exactly the same, the environmental regulations. In this mountain range, one thing that gives the tribe and the BIA a lot more flexibility specifically is the Mexican spotted owl. We still have to follow on the Reservation Endangered Species Act. We did not, and the Forest Service did not have to, but I understand why they made the decision, participate in the recovery of the owl. So the Lincoln National Forest is participating in the recovery of the owl, Mescalero tribal lands or not. And just the differences in maintaining populations versus trying to recover provides a lot more flexibility for management on the reservation. So that's a big part of it. And it's like Bela pointed out, you know, someone with the price of a postage stamp from Connecticut isn't really gonna stop what we're trying to do on the tribal land. It really goes to the tribal members. So those are the two major differences that I see here from long time working on the reservation and a long time community resident.
I've heard the mescaleros have a lot more spotted owls than the forest do.
I don't know, we have a bunch. And they're doing just fine.
Yeah.
I think we have a question.
I realize it's only been a year since the Bear Fire, but what could you say about our forest now up there? What's happening? Is some of the grass starting to grow? Is there some changes in some of the trees, shrubs? What's happening?
You can walk up there and, it's amazing. I took a walk up there, just a couple months after the fire and, you know, the grass comes back real quick. A lot of us, you know, we live here, but, you know, hiking up those big hills is kind of hard sometimes. And, yeah, you walk up there though, after a couple hours and, you know, you see that grass, it is coming back and, you can walk through some of those hillsides and they're completely toast and everything is dead. And other hillsides, you wouldn't even realize the fire went through. And then there's a bunch of stuff that's in between. Yeah, you know, you're driving on the road and you see all the devastation off on Highway 48 and 37, and it looks horrible. But, you know, you walk up in there, you know, you do a 10-mile hike in there, up and over a bunch of ridge lines, and there's a bunch of that forest which looks just fine. You know, I urge everyone to get up and strap on the boots and put the miles on.
You know, it's aside from that, it's really interesting some of the things that we've seen happen over the last 2 growing seasons, really. You know, immediately after the fire, we invested a lot of money to a tune of $8 million. Reseeding, we reseeded about 19,000 acres, and of that 19,000 acres, we mulched about 11,000 of it with straw. And yeah, that first growing season, it worked, you know, and we had a big response from the the seeds that we laid down. We had just a various mix of seeds and